It is such a joy to spend some time with you and just give us something of some highlights for you from the last couple of days of being part of the Be for Good leaders. What have been some standout moments for you that spring to mind?
So it's wonderful as always. I was in Rome last year. I enjoyed it very much. It's just amazing to see all these people who actually bring different insights, come from different parts of the world, are doing lots of things and sharing very openly their successes but also their struggles. So for me, it's really the head, the heart and the hands coming together and then being able to listen and participate and come back home with lots of ideas, things to implement, and just a renewed energy and knowing that you're not alone and that we all have our point of views, but we build bridges. That is really the wonderful things. I wrote down this morning when Walter was speaking, it's kind of the success of a company be linked to its success in regeneration. And I found it was a beautiful sentence because of course the success of the company is not going to be completely conditioned by that. But we want a link, if that can be linked to it and a company can be successful also because it is successful there, that is what we all are working for. So that's really nice. I also wrote down, less blah, blah, more data, and was really thinking about that because you need the story, you need the storytelling. But many times, the story is not necessarily scalable. It's a beautiful story, it's a nice example, it looks good in communication, but you don't want to stop there. If everyone in a company starts being very happy about a few anecdotes, then it could be actually counterproductive. But on the other hand, if you go all the way towards data, what happens is that the moment you fix a KPI, I also know as a CFO that there are a million ways to actually fulfill the KPI, be quite successful on paper, and actually have completely lost track of the underlying intention. And it is this kind of tension between the story, what looks good, what sounds good, but also the hard data, the hard facts that we are really always balancing. Being in top management is a balancing act. If it were easy, we would not be there to do it. That would be done already. So it is actually getting this inspiration and all these ideas to manage these difficult choices and to be in this balancing act alone, because sometimes you're alone in front of your final decision, but not alone because you know that you have kind of lots of allies behind you, and they're always a phone call away. Lots of the people I met in Rome, I consider they're a phone call away, and if I have a doubt, I want to talk, I want inspiration, I can always reach out. So that is what I get from this summit, and I find it really amazing.
And give us a sense into an insight into your personal purpose and vision, aside from all the companies that you are playing a role with. But just for you personally, is there a purpose, vision that you kind of is your root system?
I always have a bit of a problem with the purpose thing, because when you start thinking about it, that means that it's not so obvious to you. If I look back at my professional life and what I've also done my whole life, it's really making sense of things, making sense of the world, trying to understand. And once I feel I've made sense of something, is sharing it, building bridges. And getting insight and just checking all the time that it really makes sense and we can actually work with it. When I was a CFO, I really loved the investor relation part, because I saw it as, I'm going to explain the company to the markets. I'm also going to talk to the market and bring back in the company and explain people why they're looking at us that way. And I really felt my role was not only to just say it is what it is, financial market says that. I've never met anyone called financial market. It's just big hypocrisy to think that financial market wants something. It's just people, intelligent people. If you explain what your company is about, if you're serious about it, if you're persistent, usually you find intelligent people who are willing to be your shareholders. So I'm really hopeful about that. And it's actually these building bridges between worlds that are kind of very different that I feel is my purpose. I used to work at Heineken. I was CFO of Heineken for 7 years. There is this campaign that I really loved, which is Worlds Apart, bringing people actually in a big room with some simple tasks, putting together a bar, like a bar, just a bar to actually have drinks. And then they had some instructions, and you brought people that had nothing to do with one another, that actually were complete opposite opinions, backgrounds, and they just didn't know anything about each other before they started, and they had to actually do a simple task, which was not so simple, together. And it's just kind of like these bridges started building, and you discuss. And the moment you actually look at the human being, it's very difficult to be completely opposed, because we're all human beings. So that's something that I feel strongly about, and hopefully I can be an agent of that.
So good, so beautiful. And in terms of your last 10 years, how do you feel you've changed as a leader, as a person, as you've grown in your understanding of what we're seeking to do?
So in terms of kind of the last 10 years and how lots have changed for me, I moved to this country, and moving to another country, discovering a different culture is always something that opens up your mind. So you see different ways of doing things. I've worked in a very international company. And I've also realized that as much as I liked this job, and I found that the CFO had a huge role to play, also be the person who has the role of saying no in many cases and be the boring one in the room. If you're an ally of sustainability, then you give a lot of weight to that. So I felt really, really happy that I could support a wonderful sustainability director, wonderful CEOs who really wanted to change things with my finance background. There is so much you can do in one company, and at some point I felt that by just switching and going on the other side and going into the governance and the top governance as a shareholder representative, as a stakeholder representative in the board, I could also very much support executives who wanted to do the right thing, because you give them a safe place in a way on behalf of the shareholders, and while continuing to check that things are done in a, very rational way, and that progress is monitored and so on, you give them a safe place to really do this, prosperity, people, planet, and not only prosperity, being profit. So what I do as a board member now gives me huge insights of what's happening in company, but also I feel that the impact I can have here is probably greater than the specific impact I could have on that topic as a CFO. So I'll give you examples. I chair audit committees in many cases by actually asking, sometimes even requesting, that the non-financial reporting be reviewed at the audit committee, and not only through a table or a dashboard, but by having the person in the meeting talking to us about his or her challenge in implementing this strategy. I can do much more, because I actually give them a place around a seat around the table, a seat at the table. And I make sure that if they get to a senior committee of the board, then they get actually considered as serious enough to actually count at the top level of governance. So it's by being persistent that I help people who are persistent inside to actually bring that topic to the right level at the board. Board does a strategy. It should be the sustainability strategy as well. And then audit committee looks at performance metrics, checks that things are done in a good way, audited and so on. All this super boring stuff that actually makes things look serious. Then let's do it as well for these topics, because they're really, really serious and they're really, really important. I'm not saying we're changing the world. I'm saying that if everyone is doing their part from the angle that they're able to look at things, it's already something. But it's about alliance. It's really about radical interdependence, radical collaboration, and that's really what I believe in.
Yeah, beautiful. And has there been moments on that story, in that journey of being involved in in boards where they've been frustratingly slow to come on board something of the vision that you are casting? And give us an insight into how you've kind of worked that out, or has that not been the case in your experience?
I am not the visionary. There is usually someone who's a visionary, and hopefully it's a CEO who's a visionary. So I'm really on the side of enabling the vision. What I found we had moments of truth is every time we got a board and an executive management team together to train together on a topic. Whenever you get board members to accept that we don't know everything, maybe actually on some topics we do not know anything, and it's important to have a level playing field, to use the same vocabulary, to look at what matters. Because you can get trained in many things, but look at the company and say, okay, what exactly matters in this company? Where is our positive impact? just by doing what we do, and where is our negative risk? You are Novo Nordisk, well, you have a positive impact. You actually save lives of people by providing some things against diabetes. I mean, insulin and then all the next generations of products. This is your positive. Do it as much as you can, bringing to as many people as you can, do some R&D to develop. What are your negative impacts? Syringe injection, there is plastic involved. So, okay, look at that. How can you actually... And it's continuing to be very aware of where are your strengths and where are the things that you need to work on. It's different. In every company, it's different. So the one size fits all, yes, there'll be regulation, super important. I'm all for it. But if you don't want to be a victim of regulation, if you don't want to end up doing only administration around the regulation, be aware of where, as a company, you impact or not. And then when you follow that, then you say, okay, so on this topic, we are big on CO2 impact. Okay, let's get super trained. Let's get a climate expert come and talk to us, and then let's actually make sure we ask the right question, we have the right dialogue at the board. If it's water, at Heineken, we had a big thing on water. Of course, you have water, you make beer with it, and you consume more water than actually what ends up in your beer, because there's a whole process. If it's water, train yourself on water. How can you be a water steward? How can you work on using less water, recycling the water you use, or actually helping with a watershed somewhere? All these things, that is what matter maybe. And I'm not talking for these companies. I'm not an executive of these companies. These are examples around, and that exercise needs to be done. It's not something that you come and say, okay, we do the strategy of the company, and then on top we have this, okay, let's do ESG, and then let's actually tick bar, because that doesn't work. So
when you are involved in so many brands and companies, and I'd love you to take a Google Earth view and give us a sense as to what's brewing, what's emerging, what's developing, what's exciting you at the moment about the way things are moving forward in big business. Give some sense of hopefulness for those who maybe are feeling a bit hopeless.
So what makes me hopeful when I'm involved with different brands and companies is that I feel there are more and more people conscious that we are nature. So that it's not that we do something good by taking care of nature next to our core activities, but we are nature. And I feel it in terms also of the way executives know it's important to take care of themselves. It's important to be aligned with their values. I see lots of people wanting to do really good things, and it's about helping them and providing the space and make sure that they have this alliance around them. I think it's much more important to actually provide a safe space around an executive team that wants to do the right thing than to keep showing where they're actually stumbling, because we all stumble at one point or another. And I see really, really determined, decided executive teams moving in the right direction. Doesn't mean it goes without effort, doesn't mean it goes without failure, but I do see more of that. I must say as well, I'm a big supporter of foundation-controlled or family-controlled company. Listed, some of them are the largest companies in the world, but also having someone or a foundation that you can look at and say, okay, what do we feel is good? Where do we feel we should be going? And that you can set a strategy. And of course, you have to perform on a quarterly, on a yearly basis, but you don't get obsessed by the short term. You keep your eyes on the long term, which is easier. I do think that, whoever is setting the trend, whoever is leading by example, what you see now is banks are following, investors are more discussing these topics. Nothing's perfect. I'm sometimes asked about, okay, how do you see greenwashing? Well, ugly, bad. But the only fact that it's necessary means that we're talking about the topics, If people feel sometimes that they have to do greenwashing, that means that they are actually thinking that it's important to look good. And from looking good to doing good with the right pressure from employees, from boards, from executives, from investors, then we get somewhere.
Beautiful. B Corp celebrates 10 years. And as you think about a B Corp in 10 years' time, what are you seeing? What are you imagining? What are you thinking?
I'm going to say something that may be a bit controversial. I'm sure Marcello will like me for that, but I would so much hope that B Corp is not necessary anymore in 10 years. And that would be the celebration, and that's not going to happen. They're going to be here and successful and definitely a much bigger movement. But if it could become so mainstream that there is no other way to lead a company, And it's not even a label anymore. It's not even a certification anymore, because it is or you're not there. So that would be the dream. Maybe it's more 20 years than 10 years.
For you personally, is there a person or a brand that you look to as a source of great inspiration, as a real leader in what we're talking about? Is there one that is a go-to for you?
So of course Patagonia is a go-to. I remember also studying about Chobani yogurts in the US, and then a wonderful man who actually gave part of the company to employees, and was really a role model for many. I live in the Netherlands. I have more time than I used to have, and I'm a big fan and a big admirer and a student of Spinoza these days. So I would say this is where I draw my inspiration. And in the 17th century, in the country that invented the VOC, you also had someone who invented, in a way, freedom, and who redefined completely what it meant to understand the world. And for me, the philosophers are a go-to place at any moment. So.